Welcome to GoPowerCat.com's Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing. Now, here's Fitz.
Welcome to the 2024 Kansas State football season. This is GoPowerCat.com's Powercat Pregame Podcast, and I am GoPowerCat publisher Tim Fitzgerald. During the course of this show, we're going to try to get you ready for Saturday night's game between the Kansas State Wildcats and the University of Tennessee Martin Skyhawks. We've got our usual experts lined up. Former Kansas State football offensive lineman and host of the Big 12 Insiders, Brian Hanley, will be with me shortly. Then we'll follow up with Ryan Wallace from the Go Powercat staff, who always does a great job breaking down the opponent, and he'll do the same thing for UT Martin. And then our final expert will be Ryan Gilbert to talk about the betting lines around the Big 12 and for this game. And oh, by the way, we'll sneak a little Avery Johnson into this show from Monday's press conference at Bill Snyder Family Stadium. The game will kick off at 6 p.m. inside Bill Snyder Family Stadium. It's televised on ESPN Plus with Mark Neely and Amon Green on the call. And of course, you can also hear Wyatt Thompson's call all across the K-State Sports Radio Network. Let's not mess around. Let's get going with your Powercat pregame podcast of the Cats and Skyhawks by bringing in Brian Hanley. And now we bring in our good friend Brian Hanley, former K-State offensive lineman and host of the Big 12 Insiders. Make sure you're checking out that channel for all your Big 12 news. Big B, how you doing? I know you're busy. I'm busy. We're all busy. Let's get busy together. That's
absolutely horrible. Can't. Busy is good, Fitz. Some people get chaotic with busy. They don't like it. Busy is good in our business.
Busy is good because we got a football game to watch, to attend, to cover, whatever you're doing out there. It is Saturday night, 6 p.m. kick. Of course, Tennessee Martin rolls into town, a very good FCS team to play the Kansas State Wildcats. And let's start there, Big B. You cannot overlook these FCS teams anymore. There was a day when you could, and there are some you can, but not this one.
No, absolutely not. Look, with the transfer portal, NIL, not so much NIL with FCS schools, but definitely with the transfer portal, the way things are, you just can't overlook some of these teams, not to mention the coaching. So some of these teams are extremely well coached. They have good players. And again, you think, well, they're at an FCS school. Give it a year. They'll be scattered all over the Power Four. That's just the way it is. Every year, 85 scholarships, can't have everybody, but they'll find a way sooner or later. All I'm saying is you can't overlook these teams anymore.
No, you cannot. This is a team that has won some conference championships there in the Ohio Valley. They come in with confidence. What are you looking for from K-State? Let's say just in that first quarter, what do you want to see?
I want to see them establish a power running game and just dominate the line of scrimmage. That's what I want to see. Look, I don't care if they have 8-9 guys in the box. K-State is a better football team, and they need to go out and show that they're a better football team. So in the first quarter, I want them to be able to establish that. Now, I also want to see some big plays, explosive plays down the field. You don't have to show your hand on everything that you're trying to do to be able to get explosive plays. It's something that we've been lacking over the last couple of seasons. It's time that we get back to that. But you know what I really want to see, Fitz, and this is going to make K-State fans jump for joy. Give me a punt return. Give me a punt block or a kickoff return. Give me something in special teams, man. Just give me something that we can just say, you know what? Yes, this is who we are.
This is why you're my brother from another mother, because I feel the same way. Give us a return, please. Last season was extremely rare. I think it had been 10 years since K-State didn't have a return for a touchdown, and just doesn't happen around here. But let's peel back what you mentioned there. Let's start with that power running game. Getting that offensive line established has to be goal number one, and a power running game certainly would do that because this O-line is under some scrutiny. They got something to prove.
Yeah, they do. Again, it's a new wave of guys. First off, when you lose a guy like Cooper Beebe, look, and I have no qualms about this. Best offensive lineman in the history of Kansas State football. Period. End of story. Having said that, it's not like these guys haven't played. All these guys have played some football, or a lot of them have played meaningful snaps, not mop-up duty, meaningful snaps. That's a good thing. They've got something to prove. And now it's time to go out there and prove it. Go prove that, because everybody's counting on K-State. Just the ship just keeps on trucking. We got new passengers, but the ship just keeps on trucking. Well, if that's the case, then the engine, which is the offensive line, has to continue to move forward. And if that's what's going to happen here, they got to be the guys to get it done.
So once upon them establishing that power running game and proving that they can pick up yards against a defense, even though they're focusing on that opens up the big plays that you want, doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, play action is going to be there all day long. I know some people might think, "Oh, you don't want to show play action." Every team in America is running a play action pass. So it's not like, you're not showing it. Everybody knows that you're going to do it. Every team prepares for it. It doesn't matter. But at the same time, just drop back. If they've got that many guys committed to the box, just drop back and throw the ball over their head. That's all you got to do. K-State's going to have better skilled guys than what they have covering our skilled guys. If they got that many committed, great. Throw it over their head. Back them up. And if they won't back up, just keep throwing it over their head. I have no problems with that. But even having said that, you got to be able to run the ball. I don't care how many people are in the box. You got to be able to run the ball for 4 or 5 yards a pop against this team.
I suspect that touchdown we saw in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, long live Strawberry, where Avery Johnson just kind of tossed it over the top of the defense to DJ Giddens, might be a pattern we see repeated with him, with other guys, with tight ends. I feel like because of what K-State probably can do on the ground with Giddens and Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards and anyone else in the backfield, we're going to have the attention of safeties. I mean, that offense is going to be, those safeties are going to be focused in on those dudes because they don't want to look silly. And in the end, they might end up looking silly because there's almost too much to cover, too much to worry about with this offense.
There's a ton to worry about. But here's what I would say that UT Martin is probably going to do. Just take away something. They're not a team that's going to be able to take away everything. So just start with something and hope that K-State makes some mistakes when they try to do something different. Now, I don't suspect that's going to happen, but I think that's what UT Martin's going to do. They're just going to try to take away something. And if they're smart, they just try to take away the run. But again, that doesn't mean we still can't run the football because our guys up front have to be better than those guys. Yeah, you're not going to break the long runs because there's going to be an unblocked guy, probably 2 unblocked guys. Okay, that's fine. But that doesn't mean you still can't get downhill. You can't run wide. You can't do those types of things and still gain positive yardage. But you're right. Going over the top, I just think it's something that it's going to be in Kansas State's offense all season long, just because of not only the running game, but also Avery Johnson running the football.
Yep, let's get to that. What can we expect from Avery in his first start at home? Yeah, everyone's confident he won't have nerves, which is kind of Avery's MO. But they also don't want him to fail. They don't want him to struggle. They don't want to put him in positions of, getting out there in the first home game and throwing a pick or something. How would you use Avery Johnson in this game?
I wouldn't run him a whole lot, if at all. And I would tell him, hey, throw the ball away. You don't need to run the football. Right. Take something that's there, slide. Don't take any necessary hit. I would say don't take any hits, to be quite honest with you, Fitz. If he's running the football, I wouldn't call any quarterback run game. I wouldn't do that. There's no need to do that. You got the running backs on your roster. This is not the game for Avery to go out there and run the football all around. He'll have plenty of opportunities to do that. This is just not one of them. But you definitely want to see him throwing the football. Look, everybody saw him running last year, and it seemed like they didn't put him in enough situations until the bowl game to be successful. I like what you said. They don't want him to fail. Well, a lot of that has to do with you setting him up for success. Well, get him a quick slant route to start the game. Or, you know what? Run a play action pass and throw the ball over everybody's head on the first play of the game. That safety will come up if you run a play action pass. Just line up and throw it as far as you can and let our guy run underneath it. I wouldn't mind that being the very first play of the game because Fitz, that safety is thinking run. He's going to bite on that, and it'll be wide open.
That sounds a lot like the offensive playbook in the bowl game. They wanted to keep him healthy. They didn't want to put him in a whole bunch of dangerous positions. They bottled up the passing game, the complexities of it quite a bit, ask him to throw it away. So his stats didn't necessarily look great, but they beat a really good NC State team. That should work in this game too. And I guess I can see them almost replicating what it is, but at some point you got to let the kid go.
Yep.
You do. And I don't even know if that's next week at Tulane. Maybe they save it all for Arizona, but at some point you got to unleash him, don't you?
You do. You do. Look, we've been in these situations where K-State has held so much back and ran so much vanilla offense and defense. Either it almost cost us a game or it did actually cost us a game. I don't suspect this being the case now. Again, the number of formations, the number of just personnel groups, we can throw a bunch of stuff out there and still not show anybody anything that we don't want them to see. So I think you do have to let Avery go a little bit. But like I said, let him throw the ball deep. That's letting him go. Let him throw the ball deep and instruct him. Throw this ball deep. I don't care what happens. Throw the ball. And if you got to throw it away, throw it away. And that guy will bite up, have an underneath route or something else to complement the deep route. And I think that's the way you go. But you do have to let him go, just not this game, Fitz. I would suspect they would do that.
No reason to get him hurt in your opener. Certainly, that's going to be something they protect against. Okay, let's talk about the defense. In some ways, this is a proven defense. They've got a lot of pieces back, but they also have important new pieces to this. What do they need to prove?
Get after the quarterback. That's what they need to prove. They need to prove that they can get after the quarterback. Number one, establish stopping the run, as always. But I think they're going to be able to do that. But mainly get after the quarterback without having to blitz 3 or 4 guys, and doing anything crazy. Just line up, beat your man, beat the one-on-one block. If you got a double team, make sure that those guys are being occupied so other guys that have single blocks win your one-on-one battles and get after the quarterback. I think that's what we got to be able to see in this matchup, Fitz. That's the big question mark. Is somebody going to be able to get after the quarterback? And it seemed like a lot of times last year, the only time that ever happened is if we had to send extra guys. You shouldn't always have to send extra guys to rush the passer. Just beat your guy and make that happen. I want to see that in this game.
Last year's pass rush was just disappointing. It just didn't stir much up. And even going back a little bit, when Felix Anudike-Uzomah was here, I still feel like this defense can improve in the pass rush, can make teams really uncomfortable when they have to pass against them. And I finally think they might have the depth and quality of defensive ends with all these young guys to get that done, to be really a fearsome pass rush.
They do. They have the quality depth. And I don't know. We'll see if they're better than last year's pass rush. I hope they are, because you're right. It was disappointing. But again, some of that is scheme. Running against Big 12 teams, if you're running a 3-man line trying to beat, guys in the Big 12, that's just not always going to be, that's not setting yourself up for a lot of success. Rushing 3 guys in passing situations. You're covering the back end, I understand, but your pass rush, look, they can double team 2 people. And then if your guy can't beat a one-on-one block, there's literally no pass rush. So we got to see K-State rush 4 guys more often this season. I don't know if they'll show that in this game, but I think that's something moving forward we got to look at.
Very interesting. Big B, thank you very much. We will dig deeper into future opponents. UT Martin, I don't know what you say. I mean, there are good players on this team. Ryan Wallace will point that out later in the show. But, boy, this is a game K-State should win. I think the odds are in the upper 30s. That seems like a lot of points to me. I don't think I'd bet it, because I do think, like you do, they're going to be pretty conservative. They're not going to get so conservative that they might lose the game like they did against Tulane a couple years ago. But I think they're going to keep themselves a little bit bottled up. They just don't want to show things. You got a lot of new opponents on the schedule.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's new opponents, new team. I think K-State will come out. They'll be aggressive on both sides of the ball, which, again, that might add up to a lot of points early. Who knows? But being conservative and being aggressive are 2 totally different things. People think that they mean the same. They don't. You can be aggressive and just be conservative at the same time. And I think K-State's going to do that.
Okay. There's another kind of flavor of vanilla, apparently French vanilla. It's got a little more flavor. That's hopefully what we'll see. Big B, thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
That's it for the first segment of the show this week. And right after this break, we'll bring in Ryan Wallace to break down Tennessee Martin a little bit. And later in the show, we're going to hear from QB1 Avery Johnson, and Ryan Gilbert will step in with some of the Big 12 betting odds this weekend around the conference. I'm Fitz. We're sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing, and we shall return.
It's time to take a break for our sponsors. We'll be back with more from GoPowerCat.com.
Weddle & Sons Roofing. Protecting homes, businesses, and providing peace of mind for more than 25 years. Weddle & Sons is your Tesla solar roofing outlet.
Now let's head back to the show for more K-State sports coverage from GoPowerCat.com.
Welcome back to the Powercat pregame podcast sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing. And now let's move on to our opponent breakdown with our own Ryan Wallace. We'll get into more than just UT Martin. What are they, the Skyhawks? I'm told.
They're the Skyhawks, and oddly enough, I know a little thing or two about UT Martin. My mom is a proud alum of UT Martin, and when she was there in the mid-'70s, Fitz, they were the Pacers. So she's all against the Skyhawks. She's a loyal Pacer.
First thing, do they not know how to pick a kick-ass mascot? If you don't have a tradition, you get to be anything.
Yeah.
This is what you choose?
They went with Skyhawks.
As opposed to the Seahawks?
Let's not go there.
I don't know. It's just a weird thing. Yes, hawks are in the sky.
Yeah.
Like the running hawks, I don't know. Let's move on to the actual game here. What do you think of UT Martin?
On paper, there's a lot to like about them in terms of not just in the FCS, but, a kind of sexy pick to, go out and challenge somebody of K-State's level because they're so senior laden. I want to say there's 25 plus on both sides of the ball of juniors, seniors. They've got 16 guys on this roster that have already graduated. But honestly, Fitz, we were talking before we recorded, you would think that would be something that would scare you. And I think that this overall, though, as a matchup, still favors K-State quite a bit.
Yeah, I would agree. What do they have coming back from a very good team last season?
Well, it starts obviously at quarterback for them on offense with Kincaid Dent. He's an Ole Miss transfer, didn't get a lot of run at Ole Miss, gets to UT Martin last year, takes over the job, does fairly well. His completion percentage is not very good, not maybe the most accurate guy in the world. But, last season they didn't need him to be an all-everything passer because they had a sensational rushing attack, one of the best in the FCS. Their strength is still there in terms of the offensive line and wanting to be a ground and pound team. The interior of the offensive line, Drake Carroll, Van Every, Josiah Stingley are three guys that are all conference types. They'll flirt with maybe some FCS All-American recognition this season. Senior guys that just play really, really well together. Not the biggest. They're only about 6'2", maybe 285, 300 pounds. So not the biggest, but they operate really well. And then this year on offense, Fitz, they bring back everybody at the wide receiver position. Their skill talent is pretty good. Sneaky fast in the open field, a lot of speed to burn, but not a lot of size. The biggest receiver that they'll start, really that they'll even rotate in, is only about 6'1", 180. So a lot of guys that are in the 5'11", 170 range, but they can fly. Which again, going back to what I said earlier, good matchup problem for K-State to have because that's what K-State's corners are, undersized and fast. And then on defense, Fitz, linebacker core that's really strong, just like they were last year in terms of running the ball on offense. They can stop the ball on defense, at least in terms of the linebackers. Active group in the secondary, maybe not always the most opportune, but they're going to be around the ball an awful lot. The question, I think, on defense will be replacing the entirety of their defensive line. They've got I believe he's a redshirt freshman or a redshirt sophomore that they've got coming back out of Memphis named Charles Perkins that is really good in terms of potential, but he was just a rotational guy for him last year. He has to pick up more of the load this year. And so again, in terms of K-State, and we'll get more into it, I think that favors the Wildcats quite a bit.
Big B, Brian Hanley, kind of suspects K-State will come out and establish a power running game behind that rebuilt offensive line. What say you?
I would do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know that everybody's eager to see Avery Johnson as a passer, and I think we'll see some of that on Saturday. But I also wonder if this isn't the type of game that, you know, again, we all hate it. I turned the Bill Snyder phrase of just do what you got to do and, you know, get the hell on. And I think it, in a lot of ways, in terms of the starters for K-State, it might not be the worst idea in the world. If you want to have some passing stuff, throw it in, sprinkle it in, but you know, you don't need to go dig deep in the playbook for this one because, again, like I said, I think the linebackers are the strength of UT Martin. They haven't covered anybody out of the backfield like Dylan Edwards, really maybe even Jimmy White for that matter. And then we all know what DJ Giddens is going to do in terms of yards after contact and making guys miss. Now you add Avery Johnson to that mix against, again, a defensive line. They usually go kind of 3-4 fits. So you're already going against an odd man front that's completely new. I just think that they can have their way. And again, as much as fans won't like that in terms of not being able to see Avery, not being able to see this deep receiving core, I think it's also a blessing in disguise because you get more adhesion from an offensive line that hasn't played on K-State side that hasn't played together a ton. You know, Taylor Potier and Hadley Panzer know each other quite well, but outside of those guys, there's some new faces up there, guys that just haven't worked that much together. So, you know, getting them in sync in the ground game isn't a bad thing either. And giving them some confidence heading into week 2 at Tulane isn't a bad thing either.
He also thinks, and we'll talk about Avery more in the future, but later on in this segment, that they're going to be pretty careful with Avery. I asked him if it's going to look like the bowl game offense, and he suspects it will. What do you think of that?
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I mean, there were a number of times in the bowl game that you could see Avery kind of being, whether he was told or whether he's just smart enough to know it, probably a mix of both. It was, you know, I could probably pick up a couple more yards here, but either I'm going to throw this ball away, live to see another day, maybe see what we can do in the pass, or I'm just going to get the heck out of bounds. Right. And I don't think for the remainder of this season, we're going to see much of that Avery. I think we'll get back to seeing the high school version of Avery that's much more dynamic, much more of a risk taker, much more of a player that you and I, Fitz, have talked about even going back to his high school days, that understands how to absorb contact or, you know, get out of the way of contact as to not injure himself. I think we'll see that, you know, after UT Martin. But in terms of this particular game, it might look very, very familiar to NC State, Avery Johnson.
Okay. How concerned are you about this rebuild offensive line?
Yes and no. I'll say I'm not because of who Connor Riley is and who he has around him. You and I have a lot of faith in what Drew Little can do behind the scenes too. And so now you bring him back, you pair him with Connor Riley. And I know there's talk about the coordinator duties, but he's still going to be every bit as involved outside of being present on the field on game days, since he'll be in the booth. I still think other than that, not much is going to change about Coach Riles if you know anything about the man and his personality. And again, having Drew Little back, I just think is enormous. That being said, there is a little bit of hesitancy in terms of, you know, an offensive line that, you know, just hasn't played together that much, and a couple different guys that haven't really played that much as individuals. Love Taylor Potier, have loved him since he was a Bishop Miege. Right. But, you know, he's been extremely limited over the course of the last couple years. You know, Carver Willis took massive steps. We talked about it on this show ad nauseum last fall. Mm-hmm. But, you know, what kind of version will we see of him in 2024? Easton Kilty is a guy that was expected to come in, win that job. He's done it. Has he won the job, you know, because of his experience, or has he won the job because he's the type of NFL draft prospect that people were touting when K-State got him out of the portal in North Dakota? those are the kind of things I'm interested in watching. And of course, Sam Hecht. That'll be the big question for me. And I think really in much of the non-con, that seems to be the one area that K-State is really going to have to look at through a magnifying glass. We have a pretty fair amount of confidence in the receivers, whether they're as good, as we think they are. I think there's enough kind of proof in that pudding that we know what they can be. And you go on down the line of certain other positions that maybe you're a little hesitant on. None are going to be as decisive in terms of what K-State's going to do in the long run, I think, of this season, outside of Avery Johnson, of course, than the offensive line.
I agree. I did find it interesting that Taylor Portier was listed as an or with Andrew Langang. I don't know if that's the injuries or if Langang's just coming on that strong. Hopefully it's that because Taylor deserves a nice clean season with no injuries and also feeling healthy, because you could tell last season he was pretty limited. But those receivers are more dynamic. They've got more pieces there. They have more choices. If you're not going to play well, we're going to go to this guy. We saw them finally do it last season by bringing Jace Brown in, and he made a world of difference. Now he's a year older. He and Avery are good buddies. Now Avery's got Dylan Edwards that can play some receiver. They got some dudes at receiver, maybe more dudes than they've had in a long time.
Oh, really long time. And I like what you said there too, in terms of you don't need Jace Brown to be a star. If he does even have a minor kind of sophomore slump, if you will, it's not the end of the world, because the way they're talking about Keegan Johnson is the way they were talking about Keegan Johnson last off season before he got injured. And we saw more of that Keegan Johnson as we got into the bowl game. And I think he's going to be, to me, he's the most underrated of that group. And I think will end up being kind of the steady Eddie, if you will, as the season goes on. Dante Cephas is a guy that I'm really excited to see. It's been a little peculiar, Fitz, that we haven't heard a little bit more buzz about him. But I don't think that's the worst thing in the world either, just because, again, he's a veteran. He's gone out and proven it on the college field, maybe not at Penn State at that level, but again, maybe at Penn State, he was expected more from. And I think having Jace Brown and having Keegan Johnson, even if fans expect the 1,000-yard version of Dante Cephas, he doesn't have to be to still be a guy that can impact the game where K-State needs him, which is a big body in kind of red zone situations, a big body that can stretch the field on the opposite side of a smaller guy like Jace Brown, and a guy that can win, contested catches to move the chains, in areas that I feel like K-State struggled in times where Ben Sinnott wasn't open, right, over the course of the last 2 years. And then beyond that, Trey Spivey was really close last year to seeing the field. I think probably closer than people realize. Jace Brown just had a little bit more knowledge of the playbook, which, as we know, with Colin Klein was enormous. But Trey Spivey in certain situations could have and maybe should have been the better play in certain times last season. But anyway, they end up redshirting him, and maybe that's a blessing for the future. And then Jaden Jackson fits. We'll talk about Sterling Lockett as a returner, and maybe he gets some run as a receiver. But I think Jaden Jackson might be the guy that's not talked about enough in this room. Avery Johnson mentions him almost as quickly out of the mouth as he has Jace Brown and Keegan Johnson in terms of how he's been gelling with receivers this offseason. A guy they call J-Jack. I expect him to be probably not as lethal as he was in the non-con that first half of last season. But in terms of having a guy that you can depend on off the bench as your number 4, maybe number 5 guy, he's every bit reliable and a pretty balanced receiver himself. So not a lot of excuses, Fitz, for that group not to deliver.
There was a lot of buzz about Dante Cephas. They raved about his tools. He's got great speed. He's strong. They said he's got massive, strong hands, which is so important. But I don't think he's failing. I think everyone else is pushing him. I think there's a lot of guys fighting for playing time because this is a good room.
Maybe so. I was just a little concerned with the Chris Kleiman comment about him still learning.
Right.
It's not what you want to hear from a guy that showed up in January, but still, like we said, you don't have to be sensational. K-State doesn't need Dante Cephas to be Quincy Morgan. They've got a deep room where, as long as you can do the things that you just described in terms of, again, just being a contested catch type guy that also has some wheels to burn, they're going to find ways to get you the ball.
Yeah, you brought up special teams. I'm a little low-key worried about this group, not because of the coaching. I thought, I'm just going to say it now he's gone, I thought it was atrocious last year. I don't feel like they were well prepared. New special teams coach comes in. They got some new items in the return game, but unfortunately, they also have some new dudes kicking and punting. Boy, K-State's seen the best and the not the worst, but certainly not as productive as you need it to be. They got to settle that if they plan on winning the Big 12, because bad kicker can cost you games.
Yeah, it certainly seems like, I mean, this time last year, there was a little bit more buzz about, what Chris Tennant was going to do and how long he might hold that job. Haven't heard that much at all this offseason. So I would think that maybe Chris has settled down some. He's always had a great leg. I think that'll be used big time in the kickoff game this year. And I think that some of the guys they have around him are just as talented, right? I think they feel confident in Leighton Simmering. I think they really like Simon McClannon, a guy that is going to be the starting punter. But he was on travel team for much of the season last year as a true freshman. So a guy that they felt comfortable with on kickoffs and potentially coming in place of Jack Bloomer as a punter. And maybe even they didn't have to go to him as a place kicker last year as well. So, for me, Fitz, I'm more interested to see who ends up really winning the kick return duties with obviously the new rules in place, but still, does Dylan Edwards win that? Is it unquestionable that he's the right guy there? Or does K-State have enough there? Because that's what I always go back and forth with is like, do you really want Dylan Edwards risking injury as a special teamer? You would think that Coach Katz, the new special teams coach, would prefer, I would think anyway, to have a Sterling Lockett maybe win that job, have a Jimmy White or Joe Jackson win that job. And this year it does sound like they've got enough competition where they might be able to experiment with that a little bit.
Yep, I agree on all of that. I'll be intrigued to see how much they use Sterling Lockett in the return game, because Dylan Edwards did come in and possibly steal some time from him there. And they've got Keegan Johnson, and they've talked about Dante Cephas, among others, at that spot. So that will be something that will be kind of fun to watch. I think they're going to be a lot better in the return game. After all, they were pretty bad last year.
Same.
So, okay, let's flip it over now and talk about this defense. They got a lot to prove. I think they're going to be good, but they got young guys that need to step up to the plate. And I feel like this is an opportunity against maybe some, less experienced tackles that these young DNs can get after the quarterback a little bit. What are your overall thoughts on the defense?
Well, I think it's a group that's got a ton of potential. And as you saw with the depth chart released this week, not only are they do they have the ability to be more multiple, listing, 3 different DNs there in the starting depth chart, because they have like 13 positions listed on defense.
Crazy.
Which again, I think is just to keep everybody in terms of opponents on their heels, knowing, hey, we could bring this guy at you. And these are all the different names you need to know. But also, Fitz, the 2 deep is as strong. The second string is as strong as I can remember.
I agree.
On defense. And you could make that argument on offense too, but especially on defense, even down into the 3rd string. I mean, when Buddy Wyatt's talking about, I can play 7 guys and be happy and be fine and content with it, that you see now that is not coach speak. And they're all different. And what's interesting about this game for me is, on one hand, we were talking about the offense and maybe, fans will get disgruntled, but it might not be the worst idea in the world to just, again, kind of do what you need to do, polish certain areas that you feel need to be polished, and then go out and just be done with it. Don't dive too deep into the playbook. On defense, Fitz, I'm almost the opposite. I think this is a great contest for K-State to work in as many of those guys up front and show as many different multiple looks as you want to. Again, kind of like we saw them do with Stanford when they were kind of going back and forth, and it ended up throwing Stanford off, but it also, I felt like, gave K-State walked out of Arlington in that, 2021, 22, that game, I think they realized what was going to work about the odd man front, what might not. I think they'll be able to look at that and see which guys work in week one. If they decide to be a little bit more multiple against the Skyhawks, they can figure out. I think that will behoove them big time against Tulane, against Arizona, and then as we get into the Big 12 season. But yeah, I love all the different assets that they have to play with and maneuver along the defensive line. Linebacker looks really strong. It's a great sign when you see an Asa Newsom coming off an injury already making his way onto the two deep. So that goes to show what he can do. We've already heard about guys like Terry Kirksey, how well he's been playing. So, you know what you're going to get out of Austin Moore and Austin Romaine, but the guys behind them are starting to play their part. And then the secondary Fitz, they are so athletic, so quick, with Jack Fabris, with Jordan Riley. I feel like they finally have Jacks that are going to, not just in name, but in the position, that are what they want to be at that position. And they've had guys that they've kind of worked there, but I think both those guys are going to make that back part of the secondary so much better because they are true to the word of what a Jack role should look like. I'm really excited for this defense. And Fitz, I think this is going to be the side of the ball that carries the day for K-State this season.
No, that's interesting. I feel like they might be the better side of the ball, and people aren't talking about it. They're just kind of sneaking into the season. Wally, nobody knows better than Chris Kleiman. You can't overlook a FCS team, but does K-State take care of business and get to play a lot of guys in this one?
I think they do. I actually think in a weird way, I'm usually kind of the pessimist when it comes to the line.
No.
Right. not just in wins, but I mean, in points coming out of the, week one, I'm always like, the team's going to need to work on this and they're going to pull some starters. And so when Gil sent us, I think it was 37.5, I was like, but the more I thought about it, again, the two deep of this K-State team is so much stronger that I don't know if you're going to have that drop off that you would normally have. And I think the offense, even if there's some struggles in the passing game right out of the gate, I don't think the ground game is going to struggle against UT Martin. And I think the defense is going to really give UT Martin fits in terms of losing their starting running back, losing on defense. They lost one of their best pass rushers, both to Power 5 teams. So I just think it's a really good matchup for K-State to have a runaway win. And I was going over 37.5. So I'm thinking big here.
Who are you?
I know. And I think they might even get to 37.5. They might actually get that spread without the starters in. So I don't know. I'm pretty bullish. Overall, though, Fitz, I will say this, and I want to get this out of the way in week one. And apologies if we go a little over here, but I was thinking about this. I might be more bullish on K-State, and this is not what fans want to hear. On the pregame for week one, I might be more bullish on K-State 2025 than I am in 2024. The more I think about this team, Fitz, they kind of remind me of like 2016 in a way, or maybe even like 2011 K-State, because that was the year that you're breaking in Jesse Ertz, and you had Terrell Johnson and Dalton Reisner were returning, but outside of that, you had like Reed Niver was his first year going, Tyler Mitchell, Scott France, they were all brand new. So you're kind of breaking in a lot of new elements on offense. And that was the year they started 3-3 and then finished 6-1, beat A&M in the bowl game. And everything was rolling. Had they not come back in 2017 and had to, they lost Elijah Lee early, Jordan Willis was gone, Dante Barnett was gone, I think you would have seen that team take off. Like this team, they will lose some guys, but I think more of the core is underclassmen on this team. And so once they break in some guys, I don't know if they're going to beat all the good teams this year, just like they didn't beat a lot of the good teams in 2016, but they took off. And I feel like just like we saw with 2011 K-State, and they rounded it into 2012, just like 93 K-State, they rounded it into 94. This feels like, as we preview UT Martin, this feels like the start of not just this season, but the next 2 seasons of really, really good football in Manhattan, Kansas.
I agree. I mean, I think they might be better than 25, but that doesn't dampen what I think about the 24 team. I think they are a serious Big 12 contender and, maybe could run the table if all the chips fall and Avery stays healthy.
Right.
But K-State's got him for at least 2 years because he can't come out until he's had 3 years under his belt. And I think if he stays healthy, this is going to be an awfully fun period of K-State football.
You bet. You bet.
That is Ryan Wallace. We will bring in the QB1 in person. Well, not in person. It's taped. I'm a liar. He'll be here right after the break. We'll hear from Avery Johnson, and then we'll move on to the sports betting picks of the one and only Ryan Gilbert. We'll go through K-State and the top 5 games in the Big 12. We'll do it right after this message from our sponsors and Whittle & Sons Roofing.
It's time to take a break for our sponsors. We'll be back with more from GoPowerCat.com.
Whittle & Sons Roofing. Protecting homes, businesses, and providing peace of mind for more than 25 years. Whittle & Sons is your Tesla solar roofing outlet.
Now let's head back to the show for more K-State sports coverage from GoPowerCat.com.
Your coach was asked about having a young quarterback making his first home start. How did you manage that? And he said, I don't need to manage Avery at all. I just let him do his thing. Are you worried about your nerves leading up to the game?
No, just based on the fact that I've prepared for this moment my whole life, and if I wasn't prepared, then there would probably be some nerves there. But I'm just super blessed to be able to go out there and be able to play the game that I love, and be able to play at a school like Kansas State where the fans have so much support. So I mean, I don't feel like there's any pressure there to go out. I just got to go out there and do what I've been doing my whole life, and that's just having fun playing the game.
How fun is this offense to operate?
It's a bunch of fun. I mean, we have great coaches. I have a whole bunch of pieces around me that just go out, that make my job 10 times easier when I go out there and play. So it's just pretty much just getting those guys the ball and letting them do their thing from there.
Avery, is there anything you're looking to prove to people this season as a quarterback?
I feel like the only battle is just me competing with myself every day, and I wouldn't say there's anything I have to prove to anyone, because I know what I'm capable of, and everybody inside this building knows what I can do whenever I have the football in my hands. So there's nothing really I have to prove to anybody or do this certain thing on the field to show that I'm this type of player. It's just going out there and playing my game, and at the end of the day, I just want to win football games. So whatever I can do for the team to help us win.
I also wanted to ask one about your offensive line. You lost a couple guys from last season, but Hadley is back. I was wondering, what kind of presence he's been for the front 5 during training camp? He's
been really a role model and a great leader. I look to him at times whenever I get frustrated, and he helps calm me down, and vice versa. If he has anything that he ever needs to get off his chest, he can come to me and talk to me about it. So it's great having a leader right there next to me whenever we take the field. But I definitely think he's been doing his part and helping those younger guys get ready for the season.
Avery, is there someone on the team that you feel like isn't being talked about enough? Someone that's kind of floating under the radar that you feel like should get more pub?
I feel like really the biggest person is DJ Giddens, and every K-State fan knows how talented DJ is, but I feel like he doesn't get talked about enough on a national level. DJ is one of the best, if not the best running back in college football, and nobody gives him enough credit for that. And it might just be because he just kind of goes about his business in a different way, but he's special when he gets the ball in his hands, and I really think he's going to have a great year for us and just continue to be himself on Saturdays.
That was Kansas State quarterback Avery Johnson at Monday's press conference. I almost said Tuesday. It's going to take a while to get used to Monday press conferences. And now we start to wrap up the show with our betting guide to your weekend of depravity and enjoyment. We're going to do something a little bit different this year. Yes, we're still going to pick Kansas State. Yes, we're still using the spread. But a new feature at GoPowerCat.com every Wednesday morning. Lance Isley, one of our new staff writers, will be serving up the top 5 games in the Big 12 each week. And if K-State's in that, we'll pick four games plus K-State. But this week, we're going to pick 5 plus K-State. And let's get it going. TCU goes to Stanford for a late night kick on ESPN. TCU is a 9.5-point favorite. Gills, I don't even think TCU is going to be that good. That's how bad Stanford is. What do you think about this game?
Correct. Yeah, Stanford's definitely I'll get to their numbers here in a second, but this is a big year for Sonny Dykes, obviously, at TCU. Yeah. Which year was the fluke? Was it last year, missed out on the bowl game, or was it that first year where they obviously go to the championship game? We're going to find out, obviously, a lot, not only this year, but here in week number 1. I think there's a lot to prove for this TCU team with the way that last year, not only ended, but the way that last year went. And so I like TCU to kind of, have a bounce back opportunity here. I don't think playing on the road is at all an issue. You look at the, most Big 12 environments, blow Stanford's environment out of the water. So I think, TCU playing on the road shouldn't be too much of an issue. Stanford's offense, I think, can keep up in this game, but the defense for Stanford is just atrocious. You look at their numbers last year, 131st in college football in terms of total defense. Stopping the run, they were 85th overall, and then in terms of stopping the pass, they were dead last. So I think TCU is going to have some opportunity to score some points here. So give me the Big 12 team.
Wow. Here's a spread I did not expect. We've got Wyoming going to Arizona State. Of course, Wyoming was very good last year. They must be in a little rebuild. Fill in the gaps here because Arizona State's a 7.5-point favorite. I'm a little surprised by that number, but I think Arizona State's going to be improved. But this much, let's find out. What do you think?
I can't believe Lance picked this game as one of the top games in the Big 12, but it's week 1, right? But
yeah, it's pretty thin pickings.
Exactly. I know these next couple of weeks might be rough, but once we get into the thick of things, it should be a lot of fun here with these head-to-head Big 12 matchups. But you got Wyoming with the first-year head coach and essentially a first-year quarterback. Their quarterback had started one game last year. So essentially new quarterback and head coach. You look at, obviously, Arizona State, new quarterback, only winning 3 games last year. I'm going to take the cop-out here, take the easy way out, and just say I would love the under in this game, which is at 47.5, which is still, that's a pretty low number in college football. That's a low, total points mark, but I'm not seeing anything to entice me on either side of this game. So let's root for some field goals and some turnovers and a low-scoring game.
Well, we're going to have the Willie Fritz debut down in Houston. They play host to a UNLV program that seems to be going pretty good right now after last season. It's a 6 p.m. kick on FS1. By the way, Arizona State is another late-night affair at 9:30 on FS1. Houston is a 2.5-point favorite. So basically home field advantage. I'm looking forward to seeing what Willie Fritz does with Houston, but this is a heck of a way to start with a team that could come in and win. What say you?
Well, Fitz, just so I can stay on good terms with you and Big B, I feel like I have to just pick Houston and Willie Fritz here after how much you guys rave about him. But no, I agree. And I did some research here. Willie Fritz has lost 3 times. When he was at Tulane, he only lost 3 games that were season openers. And obviously you look back at 2021. I don't know if you remember this, Fitz. They gave Oklahoma a scare in Norman, only losing by 5 in the first game of the year. And then the other 2 losses were to Wake Forest in overtime in 2018. And then 2016, his very first year at Tulane, lost to Wake Forest again. That one was only by 4 points. It was like 7-3. It was a real shootout. But, so Willie Fritz has proven that he can compete, right? Obviously, he's a winner. He's proven that he's a winner. But he's proven that he can have his teams ready to go in week 1 as well. You look at, maybe what he had to inherit at Tulane. I don't know the exact ins and outs of that situation, but Houston obviously is a better notable program, especially now in the Big 12. It's got to be a whole lot easier to field a new roster, get a new team together in just one off season than it was at Tulane when he first took over there. So he's proven that he can win. Obviously, I'm a big fan. I've got to pick Tulane just to keep you and Big B off my back. But even if you guys didn't have that opinion, I think Willie Fritz has proven enough, obviously, at Tulane. But early in seasons, let's not forget it, Fitz, here just a couple years ago, we gave K-State a pretty embarrassing loss at the time.
Sure
at the time, though, Tulane was good that year, but at the time, it wasn't pretty.
Big 12 football starts on a Thursday night. North Dakota State at Colorado is an intriguing game. This game will be on ESPN. Deion Sanders is confident. I know that's surprising. But we know about North Dakota State. Now, look, they're not what they used to be, but they're still a prideful program that is very good. They're just not as elite as they were. I've got a weird feeling about this one. Although Colorado is a 9.5 point favorite, that kind of caught me off guard. Contrast that with the K-State game. I don't even know what the number you're picking on. It's 30 plus. So it's interesting to have an FBS program come in. Will Colorado win by 10 or more?
We'll see. I hope not. I just, the whole Colorado, everything you see with them, it just makes you, want to. This is a K-State podcast, right? This isn't a Big 12 podcast, so I can say what I want about Colorado and not feel bad about it, right? But North Dakota State's definitely a more level-headed team. Colorado certainly has the better weapons, some notable playmakers, but there's still a lot of holes on that roster. I think we talked about this on the Powercat Questions podcast earlier this week. The holes on that roster are scary for me. You look at what North Dakota State can do on offense and defense in the trenches. That's where they're going to be able to keep this game close. And I think even if North Dakota State maybe doesn't win or cover, I like a lot of points in this game as well.
Okay, very interesting. I'm looking forward to watching that. I'm just itching for football, so I get it tonight. This does release at midnight on Thursday. I got to always check that. I don't know what day of the week it is. Okay, let's wrap up the top 5 picks at least with the great one. This one I'm looking forward to. It is the big noon kickoff on Fox on Saturday. You got Penn State going into Morgantown, a huge opportunity for the Mountaineers. Neil Brown got him going better last year, saved his job, but what a way to start this season. Penn State rolls in as an 8.5 point favorite. I don't think West Virginia wins, but I think this is going to be a heck of a football game. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and this is the most expensive ticket in college football in week 1.
Really?
So it's going to be a blast. Obviously, there's no need to hype it up. It's everybody knows this is going to be a fun one. You've got West Virginia coming off of a 9-4 year. Penn State was 10-3 a season ago, and so one of those losses though for West Virginia, of course, was to Penn State. Penn State covered in that game. I guess that might be something to keep in mind. Take that for what it's worth. But I still lean West Virginia here to keep this one close at home with that environment. Of course, there's going to be, with the proximity there, some Penn State faithful, but should be a fun game. And I think that this one, more than anything, just the home environment that West Virginia has should be a plus for them. You look at the spread, though, back in the spring, this opened as, Penn State was a 12-point favorite. Now it's shrunk down, obviously, to 8.5. It was in the double digits throughout most of the summer. And so money's now coming in, or bets are coming in now, obviously, on West Virginia. So, maybe you missed out on a little bit of value there, but I guess there's, if you want to get frisky, plus 250 on the money line for West Virginia, sprinkle some on there. I think that it's not going to take a miracle with that environment to pull off an upset. And again, Neil Brown just completely did a 180 on his West Virginia career. Got to build off of that momentum he had last year.
Yep, I'm going to be watching. I might do some sprinkling. This is just a huge opportunity for the Big 12. This game would say a lot about the new 12. So West Virginia fans, if you're watching, I don't know why you're watching this K-State preview, but we demand burning couches. And burning couches only happen after victories. So we want you to burn that crap everywhere. Just the middle of the field. Get a couch, put it out there and burn it. That might be too much. Let's move on to K-State. Tennessee Martin comes in. This is a big number. What is it as of this recording?
37.5. 37.5.
37.5. Does K-State win this game by 38, Ryan Gilbert?
Well, it depends. I think most people, we can all kind of, it's a matter of time. Is it the third quarter? Is it the first quarter? When is Kansas State going to pull away and have this game pretty much won, right? Mm-hmm. The biggest thing for me here, why I like Kansas State's obviously got a lot of depth on the team, so that's a plus, but they've got players that are trying to prove something. When you have such a deep team and you have so many guys at 2 spots that are trying, or at a 3, whatever, that are trying to work their way up the depth chart, this is one of the few opportunities that you have to show the coaches, right, that, you're worthy of playing. But number one, Fitz, the most important real reason why I like Kansas State is, I don't know if it'll be Roberson or Knuth, but Avery Johnson's going to get out of this game when K-State has a big lead, knock on wood. Those guys are fighting for a number 2 spot. Those guys, we have heard a lot of good things about them throughout the summer and fall camp. So regardless of who that is, Fitz, I would assume we'll probably see both, but who knows, but they're obviously competing, they're fighting, but they're good. You know, the fact that you don't have a clear-cut number 2 means that they're giving this coaching staff a very tough decision. So these guys in the fourth quarter are going to be playing for the whole world, you know, just as much as they're going to be playing for the starters are going to be playing for on the first play, you know, first drive of, you know, all that stuff. You know, for 4 quarters, I think K-State's going to have its foot on the gas, maybe not so much with play calling and scheme, but the effort that these guys are going to be giving, you know, they're out to prove something, whether you're Avery Johnson or you are, I'm trying to think of a backup, Trey Spivey, who might get on the field, right? No matter who you are, you're gonna be out to prove something. So Kansas State, I think, you know, this game might be close for a little bit, but once it gets out of hand, K-State's going to keep that foot on the gas.
Thank you, Gills. It's much appreciated. And that will do it for this edition of the Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing. Go check them out. And I appreciate you watching or listening to our show. We will do this every game all season long, as we've done for many years. And of course, if you're not going to the Bill, you can watch on TV, ESPN Plus, or listen on the K-State Sports Radio Network. The game between Kansas State and Tennessee Martin kicks off at 6 p.m. Saturday night at Bill Snyder Family Stadium, and I hope to see you at the Bill.
Thank you for watching GoPowerCat.com's Powercat Pregame Podcast, sponsored by Weddle & Sons Roofing. This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production.